Shabbat Shalom, blessed Sabbath to you all. This week I want to talk about the holiness of the Passover sacrifice and what sets it apart from all other meals and why we should be circumspect when eating of it. When most of us think of the book of Leviticus, we think of a book that has little to do with the Passover, and in some ways we are correct. Passover is only mentioned in chapter 23. Leviticus on the whole is more about the things in the name of the book. Levi, the Levites and their family, the most holy family, the family of Aaron, and the things they had to do. This being said, it is in examining the things around the Levitical order that begin to help us see that the Passover was a sacrifice. An example of eating it is very similar to what was known in Thanksgiving offerings and how you would perform offerings of the vow. Leviticus chapter 7 verse 15, "And the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offerings for thanksgiving shall be eaten the same day that it is offered. He shall not leave any of it until the morning. But if the sacrifice of his offerings be a vow or a voluntary offering, it shall be eaten the same day." So there were sacrifices that were eaten of in the temple, and we can see a lot of parallel to the Passover through them. Now, when getting close to anything that is of the Aaronic or Levitical order, it's always good to be circumspect when dealing with holy things and not to despise what our God anoints and appoints, whom he chooses and whom he has, and the things that he's chosen to esteem, so that we don't become like Jeroboam or Saul and perform things that are not ours to do and make holy things common. A really famous example of this is from the book of Numbers, where a man by the name of Korah, he withstood Moses because he wasn't happy being a common Levite, even though common Levites were more set apart than regular Israelites, and his own clan had their own special privileges. He couldn't handle the fact that there were some things that Aaron's family could do that his family could not. And this had disastrous consequences as he and many others perished because of the rebellion. And he was very crafty in the way that he constructed this push for more. He took a passage that spoke about Israel being a holy people, and he said, well, we are all holy. We must all have the same rights and privileges. Yes, so we understand being the chosen nation is not just for the Jews in some ways. Let's remember from Romans that they are cut off because of unbelief. But also when 1 Peter 2 twice refers to us as a holy priesthood or royal priesthood, that we be careful how we exercise our status in Messiah. Yet for us who believe that Messianic faith does not make void the Torah of Moses, we go a step further in keeping the rite of the Passover. For those who don't know, the Passover is more than a lamb meal. It's a holy rite, a set-apart service. And I'm in agreement with the Jewish community in their expression today, and that it is a domestic household ritual, and it should maintain this element. Now, some may think the smaller Jewish expression today is contrary to how it was done in the days of Hezekiah and Ezra, because there we read a strong presence of Levites and priests assisting. However, this didn't mean this was a mass communal meal. What was happening here is that men that were seeking to sacrifice, they were not clean. There were some simple actions they were to take so as not to be unclean to sacrifice. And so although we read of many here in Jerusalem, I really believe they still ate it in their small groups, as with that the original way it was done in Exodus in Egypt. Now, of course, most people understand that it's not necessarily exactly like the first Passover. People no longer put blood on the doorpost. There was no restriction on leaving the house. However, from what we read, people were still very careful with how they treated the lamb. It also brings into question making the Passover into an evangelism tool to get people into churches. It is again a holy rite. It's not a spectacle. It's not a theatrical production. I suppose a group of a fair size is fair enough, but this shouldn't be abused. Now, knowing that thousands upon thousands of sacrifices were slaughtered at twilight or dusk, as most translations say, this alone should make anyone realize that the average Israelite had to be elevated to that of the states of Levi. If not raised to this level, what a bloodfest this would be for the Levites to have to perform the sacrifices. Although Jewish opinions differ, I believe the Jewish philosopher Philo that he had it right. Philo's book is called The Decalogue and the 10, and on page 159 he states, "The day called by the Hebrews in their own tongue, the Pesach, meaning Passover, on which the whole people sacrifice, every member of them, without waiting for the priest, because the law has granted to the whole nation for the one specific day in every year the right of the priesthood and of performing the sacrifices of the sacrifice themselves." Another quote here. "After the new moon comes the fourth feast, called the crossing feast, which the Hebrews in their native tongue call Pascha, Passover. In this festival, many myriads of victims are offered by the whole people, old and young alike, raised for that particular day to the dignity of the priesthood. For at other times the priests, according to the ordinance of the law, carry out both the public sacrifices and those offered by private individuals. But on this occasion, the whole nation performs the sacred rites and acts as priests." For the Jews, the Passover has become merged with the 7-day feast of unleavened bread. For others, Passover is the whole event of the 14th day, the preparation, the seder order to the service, the various components, the shank bone, the unleavened bread, karpas, bitter herbs, chareset, various cups to drink from. Strictly speaking, however, the Passover is the name of a sacrifice. By the next morning, when the bones are burnt up, the Passover is finished, strictly speaking. So specifically, the Passover isn't a lamb, bitter herbs, and unleavened bread meal. It is the sacrifice, and you eat the Passover with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. You killed the Passover, and that is why you'll notice that the portions from the book of Exodus on the Passover has it described as a rite, a ceremony, and an ordinance or service. Whereas the passages from the Feast of Unleavened Bread are about feasting, celebration, and joy. Broadly speaking, we can talk of Passover season and the season of unleavened bread as though they are the same thing, but really they are separate events within the Passover season, and the Passover having an added ceremonial, Levitical, and priestly side to it. So even though we are outside of Jerusalem and can only eat meat in memorial of genuine offerings that can only be made there, still we should not diminish the night's Levitical nature. Let's not forget how Paul spoke to the Corinthian church of people who ate of the cup and the bread in an unworthy manner, how they ate judgment on themselves. And the Passover is similar in that there is a good reason to take stock and just be mindful of how you eat it. In our zeal, let's not be careless like Nadab and Abihu, or the well-meaning holy man who reached out to steady the ark in David's day. One thing stands out about the Passover rite, and that is that it has an added degree of holiness. In Exodus 12:44 we read, "But every man's servant that is bought for money, when you have circumcised him, then shall he eat thereof. A foreigner and a hired servant shall not eat thereof." Because of the sacrificial element, our Father has elevated this meal above all the Moedim, and that the sign of the circumcision is important to him for those who wish to partake of the meal. Now, sacrificial things are in and of themselves nearer, and for this he requires more than just the circumcision of the heart. Interestingly, even in the future, we read of those performing sacrificial elements as being circumcised in both heart and flesh. So Passover is a time to encourage any men that wish to draw near in this way to get the sign of the covenant, a very graphic symbol for cutting off the fleshly man. So this is the time to do it, and if for obvious reasons you cannot keep this with your heart, then don't feel burdened. But also I would say do not eat of what memorializes the Passover flesh. The significance of the Passover meal as a household offering is further emphasized in eating it with unleavened bread. I don't know if you've noticed this in the first 8 chapters of Leviticus, but it is standard to eat unleavened bread with offerings of different kinds. It's very fitting for a sacrificial meal, which again adds to the heaviness of the rite. For many believers, the feeling for many is that this is a Jewish ritual. Well, this most probably highlights just a lack of understanding of the two-house teaching of Israel, and why Peter, after telling non-Jews that they are the people of God, he would quote about passages for the lost tribes as having a redemptive outworking in the nations, being incorporated in the broader definition of Israel. Paul uses the same scriptures from Hosea in Romans chapter 9 to also make this case. And also be aware that Messiah quoted Isaiah concerning the foreigners who bind themselves, that their offerings would be accepted to God. It was a beautiful thing when the gospel was given to Abraham, that through him all the families of the earth would be blessed. And it's a massive thing that what was spoken over the Israelites, those very words that Korah twisted, are however said over us, and that there is an extension of the kingdom to all those of the nations who have faith in Abraham's God. However, let us not be as Korah, even where we are to draw near. We need to do so carefully. Let's not be like the Corinthian church and eat judgment on ourselves, or make light of the Passover meal. Eating it with unleavened bread symbolizes a bread of humility that's not puffed up or arrogant or assuming. It has ancient Israelite history, and you cannot eat it with any uncalled for hatred of the Jewish people. The book of Leviticus, in many ways, is not as Old Testament as many assume, but it lives on. We see in Messiah, our Passover, that life is in the blood, there's substitutionary atonement, and it is not just for Aaron and his sons to eat unleavened bread with sacrifices, but we are also elevated to such a privilege as a firstborn nation, a royal priesthood, the people of God, that we may show forth his salvation and deliverance through the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Wherever you may be, may you understand his redemptive work and how near he has brought us. The privilege to not just be the people of God, but that we who are gifted with the rejuvenation of the set-apart spirit, that we may be called sons of the living God, the exact same titles given to kings and priests in those older times. At the same time, understand the weightiness that comes with this as well. We should not abuse our privilege, but approach with caution and fear. As we continue in our walk up to the time of the Spring Festival, may we grow in understanding these ancient rites, so that we may thoroughly keep them as believers in Messiah and in all sincerity and in truth. And as in the days of Hezekiah, where we may not have it all together, I believe our Heavenly Father will look down and heal us and pardon us of our failings. And may the word through the Ruach become more revealed and plain to understand as you seek His face. Many blessings and shalom.